I think to take one step back, a lot of people don't see how AI is now already used. I mean, you can't do facial recognition without AI. You can't do customer profiling without AI. So it's already in use, but it's now becoming with the generative AI and all the publicity around ChatGPT. It's now really all over the place, and it will continue.
Hi, y'all. How are you doing? We're back for another episode of Hospitable. Hospitable is a podcast for the hospitality industry where we discuss and we discover how to be more human through technology, with technology in the hospitality space. And today, my guest is Olaf van Haperen.
Yeah.
Close enough?
Yeah, close enough.
He's a senior technology partner at Eversheds Sutherland, and it's a global top 10 law practice. And he does a lot of legal advice and work in the hospitality industry. And so I wanted to bring him on and kind of speak to that today. So Olaf, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yes, so excited to have you on. And Case has told me a lot about you, mostly good stories.
Okay. Well, I've known him for a long time, so yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit, how did you find your way into law? Like, is this something you knew you wanted early? Talk to me a little bit how you got your way into the legal side of things.
Well, it actually started when I went to university. I went to study biology, which is completely different. But after about a year, I thought, my career perspective is like being in front of a classroom the rest of my life or in a lab coat. So I then thought, what else can you do that will open up the world for you? And then I thought, well, law, it's both easy to study because it's like a course in reading and writing. So that sort of set me up studying law. And when I finished getting my law degree, I started at a law firm. And they said, well, you did some years at biology as well, so you probably know technology, so you do that. So that's how I ended up in law and in the technology space. And to be honest, it does help sometimes because you've got a different way of thinking if you've got a technology background or a more scientific background. So it helped me a lot.
Yeah. I love that. And so I know you've known Case for a long time, and what people don't realize, a lot of people that don't know Case well yet realize that he actually has a law degree himself. So how did you and Case meet? Like what was the origin story of you and Case?
Well, I think I met Case about 20 years ago when he was a junior legal counsel at a financial institution. And well, we came in contact. He became my client then, at least the company he worked for, and that's how we met.
So the story goes, and now 20 years later, still kicking it, joining the podcast and all the good stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, when we look at this podcast is all about hospitality and working in legal and law, you've worked with a lot of hospitality companies and probably fair share with the tech side of things. When you think about hospitality, what does that word mean to you, like personally? And what are some of the things that you have just noticed as kind of interesting trends from your world, from a legal view, that has happened in the hospitality space over the last few years?
Well, hospitality for me personally is about feeling welcome, warm, being seen as a guest, being treated as a guest, maybe as part of the family. And if you look at law, then I think about 8 years ago, the only thing I really did was involved with in technology and hospitality was implementations gone wrong, SAP implementations that went out of scope and people were arguing. So it was always either from an IT perspective getting into a fight, or but over the last few years it's become so data driven that the I know. So the CEO of Microsoft said, I think 5 6 years ago, everybody's becoming a technology company, and I think
Yeah.
that applies to the hospitality as well. It's so technology and data driven now that um, that now when 5 or 10 years ago in this firm, the lead partner for a hospitality company would be either somebody doing employment or
Mhm.
somebody doing corporate. And now often the lead partners are the commercial partners because they
Yeah.
cover technology. So yeah, it's massive change.
Yeah. And you talk about hospitality kind of companies becoming technology companies, and we look at you do a lot with data. How has the industry as we are more digital, right? There's OTAs, there's all these other companies, there's companies like Omniboost, right? And there's a flow of data, customer data. We talked about, your definition of hospitality coming in and being felt like one of the family. How do and how should or what are the changes that have happened with the flow of that data? Because we now have more data on each customer that walks in because you have a social profile, you have a company profile, you have all these things. How has that affected or affected the hospitality industry for the better? And what are some of the things that from a legal space you're like, whew, we got to be careful here?
Yeah, well, I think no, it's a knife that cuts both ways. It opens up. I mean, so much possibilities on well on profiling clients, on getting your data, and not only personal data, but data on the use of products and services. So there's a whole world of opportunities. On the other hand, as the knife cuts both ways, it's also dangerous to be too aggressive what you do with data. And um, and and now, especially in these times of cybersecurity, hacks, breaches. Well, if you look at what happened to Marriott, the Marriott hotel chain several years ago, which was quite a well-known case where they took over a software company and they didn't really put do their due diligence right, so they overlooked a breach and they got a fine, and it was not a small fine. It was a multi million pound fine they got because they were breached and didn't report it. And well, the Marriott chain itself was utterly innocent, but well, they bought the company, so they were responsible for it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it has up the stakes, the use of so much data.
I mean, it's interesting because you can track so much about a person and know what to push at the right time in the right place, but with that comes more opportunities for breaches to happen, et cetera. And it's really interesting at the hospitality industry, right? Hospitality is global. You've got airlines and hotels and all these things that are global, but you have so much uniqueness. So Europe to the US to the Middle East to Asia Pac all have different legal requirements and issues. What do you see with kind of the flow of that data as is if I travel across the world to other parts of of the world, like how does that affect for a Marriott or somebody to be paying to be smart about that data depending on where the location is?
Well, it's well, basically it's a huge challenge. So airlines have specific carve outs in legislation to exchange information, but for example, hotel chains don't. So um, being able to send your data, the personal data of guests, for example, from European continent into the US is challenging and constantly changing because 2 weeks ago we had the new EU-US adequacy, but a certain Mr. Schrems has already announced that he's going to fight that at the European court as well. So we might end up with a ban on cross-continent data flows, US EU, in a year or two again. So it's and I think one of the biggest challenges for all the legal people active in the hospitality industry, so the legal councils and the legal departments of the big chains and of is staying on top of things.
Yeah.
There's so much happening. And we've got NIS2, which is a cybersecurity directive coming up, which will apply. You need to be ready. There's going to be notification obligations. You need to have your internal processes right. And that's even not to speak of all the AI stuff that's coming. So yeah, it's a challenging legal landscape for the industry.
Yeah, and it's just I find that so fascinating because growing up, I'm an elder millennial, so I knew time before internet, and then when dial up came, and after internet, right? But we have so many digital natives coming up, and they're so used to having their data collected and flowed and moved, and being able to show up in different places and have all that accessible. So I think these legislations make it really interesting for especially digital natives as they travel and start exploring the world more and being more involved in the travel space or hospitality or being guests. It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
Then you mentioned AI, right? It's a huge topic for everything, and I'm a huge proponent of ChatGPT and leveraging some of those things. But how do you see that affecting, I wouldn't just say the hospitality space, but the space in general, from a data perspective, from a data legal perspective? I'm sure this has got to be something that keeps you up at night, doesn't keep you up at night. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, not being a digital native, it's sometimes hard to keep up, but we try and we do. Some of our clients are the leading parties in the world on AI, so we're supposed to be on top of it. The EU has announced the EU AI Act, which is going to be the first piece of regulatory law that will probably come into place worldwide, even banning certain forms of AI. But so I think, to take one step back, a lot of people don't see how AI is now already used. I mean, you can't do facial recognition without AI. You can't do customer profiling without AI. So it's already in use, but it's now becoming, with the generative AI and all the publicity around ChatGTP. It's now really all over the place, and it will continue. I mean, um, Microsoft will some simple Microsoft will build in ChatGTP in PowerPoint, in Word,
Yeah.
in Outlook. You know, send this, send Rob an email on this and this, and it needs to have that content. Give me a draft, and so it will be a digital responsive environment all around us.
Yeah.
And that will probably apply for the hospitality industry as well. So, whether you're in a hotel room or traveling or need to book book a journey or a stay, whatever, it's going to be, well, it's going to be bigger than the internet, basically.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because I know that there's already some different apps and things that you can do to get ChatGPT tied into Siri on your phone
Yep.
and ask it how, like, to do, like, hey, I want this type of, I need something to take to a party that is gluten free, blah blah, and it'll come up with a recipe. And here's what you need to go to the store and buy. Like, there's so much that can happen. But think about that from hospitality industry, right? Like, I earlier this year I was in Cabo, and we were looking up all the different things that we wanted to do and build an itinerary. And I've seen some of my friends who've gone to like Lisbon and London,
Yeah.
and they put in chat GPT, like, give me an itinerary of the best things to do in Lisbon, food, hiking, food, drink, whatever, and then they built in an itinerary.
Yeah.
As a guest of the hotel, you could build that in your hotel room, and then you could go downstairs and talk to the agent to get everything booked. Like, it could change the game on how you experiences and get those things booked and interact with the hotel staff, etc.
Yeah. And again, this also works well. What we see in our practice is that it's sort of, either companies are looking at it from, creating new services, new value, but there are also a lot of companies who look at it from a cost cutting perspective. I was talking to a software development company a month ago, and they had been doing all proof of concept studies with Code Whisperer and Copilot from GitHub, and which is Microsoft and Amazon. and they're thinking of hiring 30% less junior software developers because you know there are these AI tools. So you can look at it from a cost cutting perspective, but also
Yeah.
creating new services. And well, it's game changing in that regard.
Yeah. I think that it's interesting is that yes, it may. Everyone's like, oh, AI is going to take people's jobs. It may take some jobs, but it's going to open up new jobs, new services, new opportunities. Because at the end of the day, especially in hospitality, right? When we think about hospitable and what that means, we want to feel seen, we want to feel warmth, we want to feel connected in that space. So there's still nothing is going to take away the fact that there needs to be like, we are humans and we crave human connection. Right? I think we saw that when the world shut down. A lot of people didn't realize how much they needed that human connection. It just changes the way that human connection happens.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. COVID has taught us that real face-to-face time, human interaction is vital. I mean, I see it in our firm. I see it in my clients that the working from home is slowly changing, at least going for to a large extent back to the office
Yeah.
for that interaction. And the other thing is that um, the nature of an AI isn't creative, and I'll get into a lot of discussions with technology people. But as we see creativity, I mean, an AI has had a learning database, and if it's depending on the type of AI, it's constantly learning, but it can't think out of the box. And when you in hospitality, when you want to, go above and beyond for your customer, for your client, you will need creativity. And it's basically more or less the same as in law. Within our profession, you've got a lot of discussions about AI will take over the legal profession. But in the end, if you look at case law, at really creative solutions, there's no learning database with that solution. So
Yeah.
the human factor will always be decisive.
Yeah. I love how use the word creativity because you can argue that it can be creative in how it pulls data and does stuff, but at the end of the day, it can't be creative in the fact that our human brain, our human element, there's something to it that is creative,
Yeah.
and the way we interact, the way we problem solve, the way we be human. Because sometimes creativity comes from a rational database or rational thought.
Yeah.
Sometimes creativity comes from an irrational, subconscious, experiential thing that just naturally happens that you're not actually even sure how you came up with that, but that creativity is there. It sparks something. So I love that you share that because that really resonates with me, um, of like why the human element and we're both here on a Friday, you afternoon and me in the morning, working from home. But I hate working from home, and I know a lot of people are like work from home, work from home. I'm the opposite. I live in New York City for a reason,
Yeah.
right? I want to feel the hustle, the bustle. I want to feel that energy when you walk into the city. And I'm sure you've probably been to New York a couple of times. When you walk here, just walking, you feel that energy. You could be tired, you could be dead ass tired, and you walk into the city, and you're like, feel the energy from everybody else. And I feed off that, which is why I live in a city like this. I know not everyone's like that, but I do think that, we realize that human connectivity, human creativity, human emotion, human connection is such a big piece that while AI is amazing, it's going to do so much for us as the industry changes and evolves. I don't think it's ever going to take away this. And I love being able to talk on a screen. I would love to be able to do, but I'd love to be able to do this more in person, right? Like something so much more fun about just being in the same room together and feeding off each other in a way that you can't always do on a screen.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, studies show that if people communicate, only 20-30% is actually the sound that you make, the words that that you speak, and the rest is all non-verbal that relays the message. So
Yeah.
yeah, you see, a lot get lost.
Yeah, it does. And I truly believe in there's this flow of energy from humans, and when you're in that room with somebody, like your natural bodies are just connecting on different levels because of all of that, and I think that creates such a unique, palpable experience in itself, and that gets lost. So I love that.
Yeah.
So as we kind of close out, really wanted
People will
to
always be traveling, therefore, and so there is
exactly.
always need for hospitality.
Exactly, right? And that's what's so unique, right? And I know that it's amazing what we can do and provide people who do not have the ability to travel experiences, right? But I think there's something about stepping out and stepping onto that beach or stepping onto the cliffs of Moher or visiting some small town in Southeast Asia and experiencing the food and the culture and all that, right? And so we're always going to be out moving. That being said, I always love to ask this question because I know that you got into law because you wanted to travel, you wanted a job that can allow you to go across the world. Give me your best travel story, the one time that you just like that's whenever if somebody says, "What's your best travel story? What's your best memory?" and your worst travel story, the time that you're like, "Shit, that sucked."
I think the best is, well, it's a bit corny, but it's my honeymoon. So we went to Bali and we dived with together. We dived with with the big manta rays.
Mhm.
So that was way beyond. Last year, I had the privilege to dive with a whale shark, but 6 years ago,
So were you in Mexico or where were you in?
I
Where did
was
you
in
dive with whale sharks?
Mexico last year.
In La Paz.
Yeah, yeah.
So did I. I did that this year in January.
Oh, well,
One of the best experiences ever.
absolutely. But the dive together with my then new wife with the manta rays that topped it. That was really incredible. And I think the worst travel story was so we have this thing in our family that once one of our kids goes to high school, it gets to travel European city, and I go with, in this case, with my son. And I asked him, "Where do you want to go?" And he said, "Well, I don't really mind the city, but I want to visit a football game of Manchester City." So I booked, a hotel. I went online to see when Manchester City would be playing, and they would be playing Cardiff on a certain date. So I booked the flight, I booked the hotel, I got me the tickets, and then I don't know, 2 months prior to the game was cancelled. So I went online and I saw, well, there's another game. Manchester City was playing Brighton Hove Albion. So I thought, well, great, buy tickets for that game. And we were leaving on a Friday, and on Thursday evening, I came home late. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to print out the boarding passes and the tickets to the game. And I don't know if you know anything about football, but so I printed out the tickets for the game, and it says Manchester City, Brighton Hove Albion. So I said, okay, good. But something caught my eye, and then I looked again, and it said Wembley Stadium. And I thought, shit, Wembley Stadium is in London. And I got tickets to fly to Manchester. I got a hotel in Manchester. So I spent half the night rebooking my flights and getting a hotel in London. And when I picked up on my son after school on Friday, I said, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is we're not going to Manchester City. The good news is that we're going to Wembley Stadium to see the FA Cup semi-final, because that was why the game was in Wembley. So yeah, that was my worst travel story.
Oh, that had been. I bet that was like sheer panic.
Oh
The
yes,
sweats got on. Like, oh shit, because you, because you had to figure it out
yeah,
for him.
exactly. Yeah,
Oh man, I love it, Olaf. And I appreciate you for jumping on the pod and sharing and really chatting. I was really excited because I know data is your background, so I really wanted to talk about AI and how AI is gonna impact the hospitality space. And appreciate you for just spending a Friday afternoon. I know it's a summer Friday. Weather's probably nice and wanting to get outside and enjoy the weekend. So I appreciate you taking some time with me here, Olaf. How can for the listeners out there, how can they follow along with what you're doing or get in touch if they ever have questions or things of that nature?
well, I'm got a pretty good profile on the internet. So if you look up my name and you connect it to either lawyer or data or Eversheds, then for sure you'll find me.
Excellent. Well, I'll make sure to have that also put in your LinkedIn just so they have a starting point in the show notes. So if you want to get in touch with Olaf, please just click the show notes. You can find that. Olaf, thank you again for being a part of the Omnibus family. And I know you and Case go way back and for jumping on the pod and spending some time with me. I'm really excited. It was a lot of fun. So appreciate you, my guy.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank y'all.